分别总是在9月，回忆是思念的愁。深秋嫩绿的垂柳，亲吻着我额头。在那座阴雨的小城里，我从未忘记你。成都带不走的只有你，和我在成都的街头走一走，直到所有的灯都熄灭了也不停留。你会挽着我的衣袖，我会把手揣进裤兜，走到玉林路的尽头，坐在小酒馆的门口。
My name in Chinese is Gao Da Bai, and my friend Liu Chunhui gave me this name before he even met me. And Chunhui is a really funny guy, and the name was meant as a joke in some ways, but in some ways the name has stuck. So the first character in my name, Gao, means tall, yet it also can mean high, lofty, or elevated. Da is an image of a person with their arms outstretched, and that means big, but it also can mean great, can mean vast, can mean large, and can mean high. Bai means white in its most simplest form, but it can also mean pure, unblemished, or bright. Characters, or Hanzi as they're known in Chinese, are as ancient as the Chinese people, going back 4,000 years to the mythical Shang dynasty and discovered on oracle bones. A modern Chinese person can't read a 4,000-year-old oracle bone, but you can see the progression and the development of these Chinese characters, especially simple ones like Gao, Da, and Bai. So, in its most simple form, my name means tall, big, white. Thus the title of this video series, Tall, Big, White on China. Chunhui is a clever guy though, and in naming me Gao Da Bai, he was making a joke, but at the same time, he picked for the first character in my name, Gao, a real Chinese surname. So I could rightly be called Mr. Gao, Gao Shensheng, Xiansheng. I could also be referred to as Gao Lao Shi. I am a teacher, and so my students, if they wanted, could call me Gao Lao Shi in Chinese. I also could be Gao Ge, Brother Gao, as people would commonly call me in Chinese as well. So he gave me a real actual name, and Gao Da Bai is actually my legal name in Chinese. The name can take on also very metaphoric meaning beyond its sort of joking name meaning tall, big, white. By using the more metaphoric meanings for these words. And so very often if you put my name into a translator, it will be renditioned as great white. So by naming me, Chunhui made me his brother. And in fact, it is actually his voice you'll hear in the opening of this video series singing his rendition of Chengdu by Zhao Lei. I've lived here in China now for almost 7 years, but my personal journey in the East started in 2011 or so when I was first asked to teach a course in East Asian cultures. Prior to this, I had never really been interested in Asian culture or history. In college, I took a course on the history of China, but it met every morning at 10 a.m., which was far too early for me as an undergraduate. I remember walking into the midterm examination for one of the few days that I actually showed up to the class, and it was actually the midterm. There was one exam essay question, and it was describe the role of Buddhist monasteries in the Tang political system. I had no idea what to write, so I just wrote an essay about the role of Christian monasteries in Europe during the medieval period, and then promptly went to the registrar and dropped the course. I had always thought of people who had a deep abiding interest in an aspect of Asian culture as a bit odd. Why embrace a culture so obviously different from one's own? Yet here I am with a Taoist saying tattooed on my own arm. As I spent a summer preparing to teach East Asian culture by reading China, A New History by Fairbank, I came to realize there was simply so much I didn't know about China today and in the past. My only connection to China at that time was a deep respect and admiration for Buddhist philosophy, albeit the Japanese interpretation of that ancient religion. While it's unpopular today because of its imperialist and racist undertones, I still believe there is a Western culture that is based upon a classical tradition carried down to our modern world over thousands of years from the ancient Greeks and Romans. While I differ from some who use this as an excuse to argue that Western culture is somehow better than other cultures, and I also throw a much larger net over what I consider to be part of Western heritage, I nonetheless do believe there is a vastly different Eastern culture that has its clear base in the Middle Kingdom, 中国, or as we call it, China. In 2012, I took my first trip to the new China after already having taught about it for a year. I wanted to get my own firsthand impressions. The China that I discovered was not the China I expected. It seemed to me a totally foreign place with a language I couldn't begin to understand. Its people had a culture that seemed in many ways inviting, but in other ways impenetrable. It was a modern country, more modern than I was prepared to accept, yet at times many of its people seemed backward, and some even seemed to lack a basic common decency. The crowd. So that's why we're here. My travels in China continued into the following year, and in 2013, I journeyed to Shanghai, where I first met my wife, Zhe. More and more, I began to understand Chinese culture by being immersed in it, and by learning a language more ancient than any in Europe, I came to slowly understand that I had been right. While Western culture has been heavily influenced by Chinese ideas like Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, likewise Eastern culture has been heavily influenced by the West with ideas like capitalism and communism, as well as a hearty dose of commercialism. China and Asia more largely remain a distinct and unique part of the world. Someone far wiser than me once said, if you visit China for a week, you can write a book. If you spend a month here, you can write a paper. Live here a year, a paragraph. If you spend more than a year living in China, you can write a sentence. Any expat who has lived in China knowingly laughs at this statement. Why is it true? China is simply so different from home that it's almost impossible to explain it to someone who has not lived there. Despite this, after almost 7 years living in China, I want to do more than just write you a sentence with this video series. At this time in US-China relations in particular, there is a clear lack of understanding between our two countries. For the time I've lived here, I've tried to explain my own culture and habits of mine to my Chinese family and friends. Now, seeing that lack of understanding in my home country, I want to create a series of videos that will help people in America and in the West understand China as it is today. As a historian and amateur anthropologist, I believe that history is paramount to understanding a place. People who don't know their own history are nonetheless impacted by it in ways they don't even understand. China is no different. For that reason, I want to introduce China to you by exploring important historical and cultural ideas, events, and trends, and demonstrate exactly how those ideas and trends influence China and its people today. From ancient Chinese philosophies and religions like Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, and how they influence Chinese attitudes today about everything from workplace etiquette to driving to a person's relationship to power, to an exploration of the cyclical view of history, so foreign to Westerners, which may help explain why the Chinese government today blocks the internet from so many of its citizens, and attempts to stamp out what seems to outsiders like a harmless martial arts movement. I want to share with you how Chinese folk religion impacts everything from building design to ideas about health to medicine. I will give you a glimpse inside the Chinese concept of community so you can better understand the place of family and friends in Chinese life. Many Americans I know believe that I live in a place akin to North Korea, some sort of communist hell. And while China is certainly an authoritarian country, I will introduce you to the new boss and show you how in many important ways he's the same as the old boss. And when I say old, I'm talking about 2,000 years old. Red China, communist China, at the end of the day, it's still the same China it's always been in many different ways. In doing this, I hope to educate and to help bridge the growing gap between China and the US. I will confess, I do have a vested interest in doing so. My continued happy life and livelihood depend upon China and the United States having a good relationship. However, it is more than that. When I see statements by American political leaders or idiots on Facebook talking about China in a negative light by spreading false or misleading information, it does make me angry. The China you were given by the media is not the China that I know. And as a teacher, I feel an obligation to set the record straight as best I can. So that's why we're here, to give you some historical and cultural perspective to help you understand what China is today and hopefully help you sift through the clutter and confusion. Along the way, we will learn a little Chinese together and come to a deeper understanding of Zhongguo, or as you know it, China.
让我掉下眼泪的不止昨夜的酒，让我依依不舍的不止你的温柔。余路还要走多久？你攥着我的手，让我感到为难的是挣扎的自由。分别总是在9月，回忆是思念的愁，深秋嫩绿的垂柳亲吻着我额头，在那座阴雨的小城里，我从未忘记你。成都带不走的只有你，和我在成都的街头走一走，直到所有的灯都熄灭了也不停留。你会挽着我的衣袖，我会把手揣进裤兜，走到玉林路的尽头，坐在小酒馆的门口。
不用着急，我们慢慢来。反正现在待会儿剪辑就行了。
来剪辑。
你要先说一个 1, 2, 3。
等最后看我手势哈。准备好了没有？
开始了。
亲爱的朋友们，
快点。
亲爱的观众朋友们
，10秒钟，只有10秒钟。
我们为大家演奏一首即兴曲，祝大家国庆快乐。